Hello, folks. I'm Josh McGee, and welcome to another episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, man, we got a lot of soccer to get to on this week's episode. We got so much going on here in the U.S. with soccer. Of course, we've got two major international tournaments going on, and there was a big match this week in St. Louis that I'll provide a little bit of coverage on here in this episode. And brought back a guest this week. Very excited to be talking with a classmate and a friend from my time at Bradley. And his path into sports over these past few years can involve a lot of great soccer talk. That's why I'm wearing my Bradley soccer shirt. So I'm very excited to catch up with him a little bit later on in the show. Of course, in the home studio this week, I know you guys have seen these jerseys plenty over the past few weeks, but because those two teams, Belgium and Italy, will be facing off this weekend at Euro 2020, had to keep them up. Of course, they're two of my favorite jerseys. But again, looking forward to what I've got on this week's episode. A lot of great soccer to talk about, but I want to talk about a phenomenon that we've seen at Euro 2020, and it involves a little bit of a deeper discussion in terms of the strategy and the tactics of how to tackle one aspect of the beautiful game. That aspect that I want to talk about here to start the show would be the penalty kick shootout. Now, of course, over the years, there have been plenty of arguments made to get rid of the penalty kick shootout, especially deciding matches at major tournaments. The only argument that I would make about the penalty kick shootout is that it's the single most vulnerable and nerve-wracking experience in all of sports. Don't give me, taking a putt in golf or kicking a field goal in football or even, shooting free throws in basketball. It's the single most vulnerable spot because you've got that long walk up towards taking that kick. The eyes of the world are upon you. It's only on you. It's supposed to be an opportunity that is tailor-made for the offensive player to score. But if you don't, it comes all crashing down on you. Because of those aspects, I think it's the single most vulnerable and nerve-wracking experience in all of sports. Another part of it is it's amazing to think that after 2 hours of unimaginable hard work, that everything can be undone with just one kick. At the same time, you're watching players from the other team either convert or miss their chances, or your own teammates, converting or missing their own chances. And for the neutral supporter, for the fan, that's what the allure of the penalty kick shootout is all about. We love that drama. We love that pressure. It levels the playing field like nothing else in this sport. Doesn't matter how great you are, or how many great players you have. At the end of the day, if you get to this shootout, anything goes. The pressure is the same. The situation is the same. And it comes down to who can execute and who can survive that situation the best. So in terms of, best team in the world versus an absolute minnow, a Cinderella team, everything goes out the window when you get to a penalty kick shootout. And that's why it's, the good parts of it, and that's why it's still in this game today. Now, over time, players, and especially star players, are remembered for the totality of their accomplishments throughout their career. But a lot of the times, they are remembered either better or for worse in those moments where they were able to come up clutch or they spectacularly failed taking a penalty kick. That is what we saw play out this past Monday to one of the best players in the world. That would be France's Kylian Mbappe. He experienced this phenomenon in the penalty kick shootout, France versus Switzerland. All the other players had made their penalty kicks, so he was the last one to take it before they go to the sudden death round. He steps up, he takes it to his left, the goalkeeper's right, but Jan Sommer was able to get over there and make the save and eliminate France, surprisingly so, from Euro 2020, with Switzerland moving on to the quarterfinals. It was shocking to watch in real time, and it's still pretty shocking, a few days after it happened. Think about Mbappe and the rise that he has had in his career after, dominating at AS Monaco, rising up to the ranks in French football, moving to PSG, being successful there. He arrives at the 2018 World Cup where France completely lights the tournament on fire, was one of the top goal scorers, earned the Best Young Player award. Everything was great. World Cup champion. Everything's going great. He arrives here at Euro 2020, his first opportunity to compete for France at the European Championships, and he leaves with no goals, and his lasting impression being that penalty kick that he had saved there in that shootout that would eliminate France from this tournament. He had plenty of chances. He was very active out there on the flank, but he was never able to put anything away. And at the end of the day, the results matter. This is a results-driven business. He wasn't able to get it done. And it was one of the main reasons why France were eliminated. And of course, that penalty kick had a lot to do with it. It's surprising because this past season for PSG, he was 9 for 9 on penalty kick attempts across all competitions. So he came in, he was given that 5th spot. Not sure if he decided that or if that was Didier Deschamps' decision to hold him there until that 5th spot. But at the end of the day, it backfired, and that is why France were eliminated here from this tournament. And I wanted to focus in on what happened on Monday because I wanted to talk about this specific aspect of the penalty kick shootout and what I think teams are doing wrong. Now, again, there's not an exact science to a penalty kick shootout. You just have to do whatever it takes in order to survive. But I think teams that hold their star player out until that final penalty kick attempt are doing the player a disservice, and they're doing the team a disservice. Think about these two situations that could play out, neither of which are good. The first one being what happened on Monday, right? Nobody bats an eye. Everybody converts their penalty kick attempts, and you're left with that one final player with all the pressure in the world, knowing that if they miss it, they're eliminated. So you have that type of situation, put all that pressure, especially on a young player like Mbappe, all that pressure in the world for them to make that one kick. Then you have an even more of a nightmare situation, which we have seen play out at multiple different levels of this beautiful game. And that would be other players on the team missing their penalty kick attempts. It comes down to the fact that the other team has done better. They convert an attempt, they clinch the penalty kick shootout a little bit early, and your best player never even has a chance to take a penalty shot. We've seen that plenty with one, Cristiano Ronaldo, who usually has always elected to take that final shot, whether it be for Portugal or for his club team. We saw just this past year for Juventus in the Copa Italia final. He wasn't able to take a penalty kick as Napoli were able to beat Juventus early on and kind of deny him that situation. We saw that in the 2012 Euro semifinals, I believe, Portugal versus Spain. Ronaldo never had a chance to take a penalty kick. So again, you run that risk of not even having your best player, your best striker, your best finisher taking a shot because the other guys on your team weren't able to come up big in that opportunity. And I get it. Mbappe has played in plenty of big matches already in his career. He's one of the best players in the world. You shouldn't be coming up with excuses for him. But at the end of the day, he's still only 22 years old. And the fact that everybody had already made their attempts, he's got all this pressure considering who he is, who he plays for, and what the situation was. I mean, could you expect any other 22-year-old to come up big in that situation? It would be a lot to ask of them. I think it would have been better if France had put him at the beginning of their list there for the penalty kick shot, maybe in second, because again, in that situation, if somebody misses, you've got the time on the goalkeeping side and on the player side to make up for that mistake. And you want to put maybe one of your veteran players, maybe not one of your star players, but someone who has taken a lot of penalty kicks in their career, who's had experience in that moment, been able to convert. You want to have that kind of anchor back there in order to make sure that if it's a situation where everybody scores their penalty kick attempts, then they are there to make sure that nothing happens like it did to Mbappe. Now, of course, again, you run that risk potentially of not having them take that penalty kick attempt, but you should have a pretty deep group of players who you feel would be competent enough to make it in that type of situation. You want to get off to a good start. I don't think teams value that enough. It sets the tone for the shootout if you're able to put in those first couple of attempts. So you want to make sure that you get off to a good start. And you want to make sure that you don't have that situation like we've seen with Ronaldo where your best player doesn't end up taking the penalty kick. So again, could have rethink this a little bit better. Again, I'm not sure if Mbappe asked to be that final penalty kick taker, if that was just the mentality for France, but it ended up backfiring. And again, I think there's just too many different scenarios that lead to, messing up in that type of situation. At the end of the day, players and coaches must take responsibility in shootouts, put pride aside, and come up with the best formula that is best for everyone. Forget the shootout. This was obviously the first one of the tournament, but we've seen so many penalties here at Euro 2020 either be missed or saved, and it just comes down to, picking the right player, someone who can survive that type of pressure in that situation in order to convert that chance. I mean, before he was eliminated, Ronaldo, I believe, went 3 for 3 in that type of situation. So again, it's all about finding the right guys, the right combination. And if you get to that shootout, ensuring that you have something that works for everybody. That wasn't the case here with France. They messed it up, unfortunately, with Mbappe, and you see themselves crashing out of Euro 2020. This is the type of stuff that has a huge impact on a player's career. It has ended players' careers sometimes, more often than not. Now, of course, the player with the caliber of Mbappe, I think he's going to be able to bounce back from this, but still, this is going to be a lot to take. France were one of the unquestioned favorites of this tournament, and all of a sudden they find themselves crashing out. And that's what a penalty kick shootout can do, right? It can bring the best team in the world down to the level of everyone else because of the pressure and the situation at hand. So again, this is something that teams can learn from going forward to set themselves up better down the line. We still got plenty of matches left at Euro 2020, Copa America, other tournaments this summer, and this is definitely something to figure out going forward as to what the best situation is for your players and a penalty kick shootout. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into what went down over this past week at Euro 2020. I would say by the time you start watching this episode, in terms of the quarterfinal matches this weekend, Switzerland, Spain's probably already happened, and you're getting ready to watch Belgium versus Italy. I'll talk all about what goes down here over this weekend and the semifinals on next week's episode. But I want to cover what all went down in the round of 16 because a lot happened. a lot happened, especially on one particular day. But let's start off with the first match of that round, and that would be Denmark versus Wales. Denmark crushed Wales 4-0 behind 2 goals from Kasper Dolberg. It was a complete performance by them. Wales only had 1 shot on target, and they just weren't able to recreate that magic that they had in 2016 when they made the semifinals. It was a great performance by Denmark. They didn't even have all of their best players. Yusuf Poulsen was out due to injury, but Dolberg stepped in, set the tone there with that early first half goal. And yeah, Wales just couldn't get anything going on the offensive end. Gareth Bale, Aaron Ramsey were basically non-existent in this match. So Denmark still riding that momentum, playing for Christian Eriksen, who's been recovering, off-site, been watching his team play. But they look really good in this game. It seems like they've finally gotten their feet under them. They're fully into this tournament. And yeah, they got a great opportunity moving forward to continue on here. But a very complete performance by Denmark. Wales just not able to recreate that magic. And yeah, pretty standard here for that first match in the round of 16. Then we had Italy versus Austria. Italy had been completely dominant in this tournament, but Austria made them sweat in this match. It was tied for the longest time. We had to go into extra time, but it was those substitutions that Italy made late on in the second half that proved their worth. Italy were able to score twice in extra time. They let up a goal late there to Austria, snapped their 1,168 consecutive scoreless streak there of not conceding, but it wasn't enough. Italy were able to win that match 2-1. Again, I talked a little bit about him before the tournament, but I think Federico Chiesa, one of the best young players at Euro 2020, guy who Juventus bought this past season, who was great for them. He comes in this match, scores that excellent first goal, taking that touch around the defender before smashing it home. That Italy were able to pick up that insurance goal that they needed. Hey, I definitely think Italy needed this. I think they coasted during the group stage. They needed a little bit of a tougher opponent. Austria made them work on the offensive end, but still Italy's defense basically held firm for most of that match, and they were able to get things done. So I think going forward, this will benefit Italy, that they had to really work for it in this match. And of course, they got a tough task coming up here versus Belgium. But still, very impressive from the Italians. They've won every match so far this tournament. We'll have to see going forward if they can continue that. Next up, we had our first major upset of the tournament. It was the Czech Republic versus the Netherlands. One of the best center backs in the world, Matthijs de Ligt, was shown a straight red card early on in the second half. He kind of got beat on a long ball over the top. He slipped up a little bit. He reached out for the ball with his hand, and his yellow card that was initially given was upgraded to a red card, and that's what opened the door for the Czech Republic to win the match 2-0. Patrick Schick scored his 4th goal of the tournament. He scored 4 of the Czech Republic's 5 goals so far. They were able to get things done, and even more impressively, obviously the red card helped out a little bit, but still, especially for that first half, they were able to shut out what was the highest scoring team from the group stage in the Netherlands. Very impressive from the Czech Republic. I don't think anybody really expected them to get out of their group, much less do something like this, but they were able to get into this match, especially after the red card, convert their chances. The Netherlands, right before this red card, had a great chance to go up 1-0 on a breakaway. They couldn't convert. Then, of course, the red card happens, completely changes the whole game. But at the end of the day, just more clinical on the other end from the Czech Republic. And, of course, with the red card, they were able to keep the Netherlands out. So, again, they took advantage of an opportunity given to them, and that's what they've been doing this whole tournament, right? It started with Scotland and that 50-yard screamer because the goalkeeper was out of his net, and here with the red card. So all about, doing what you can with what you're given. If the opportunity comes about from your opponent, you got to take advantage of it. So that's what the Czechs did, and that's why they're moving on to the quarterfinals. Then you had one of the more star-studded matchups of this round, and that would be Belgium versus Portugal. Weren't too many chances in this match as you would have hoped, not as offensive-minded as you would have expected, but Belgium were able to get it done. They had 1 shot on target, and it went into the back of the net, and that was from Thorgan Hazard. It was enough to beat Portugal 1-0. I believe Portugal had 24 total attempts, but not many of them on net. Cristiano Ronaldo didn't do much in this match, but he didn't really get any help from his Portuguese teammates, and they find themselves out the reigning champions. A little bit of a disappointment. They had that first match where they looked really good, but since that point, they just weren't able to get things done, especially on the defensive end. Something that isn't getting talked about enough. João Cancelo testing positive for COVID-19 before the tournament, getting taken off the team, I think had a tremendous effect on Portugal. They looked terrible on the outside on defense and just weren't able to get it done from that standpoint. Offensively, you had someone like Bruno Fernandes getting benched after the second match of this tournament because he just wasn't performing well. He has had such a great season at Manchester United, and find him, on the bench here is just shocking, but that's where he belonged. He just wasn't playing good enough to be in that Portuguese side. Belgium, on the other hand, we talked about coming into this tournament, their defense being a huge question mark. well, they've only conceded once so far in their matches. So they've been doing great things there. Interesting going forward, we saw Kevin De Bruyne and Eden Hazard subbed off from this match early due to injury. Don't know about their status for Belgium versus Italy. If they play, they got a great chance. If they don't, it's going to be a tough task for them going up against one of the better teams at this tournament. But still, they got things done here and were able to eliminate the reigning champs. Then came the day of madness in the round of 16. It started with Spain versus Croatia. Spain thought they had the match wrapped up at 3-1, but Croatia were able to score 2 goals late in the second half to get the match to extra time at 3-3. However, Spain were able to put their foot down in this instance. They picked up 2 goals, the first one being from Alvaro Morata, which he desperately needed, and they were able to hold on for the 5-3 win. This was a surprising amount of goals, especially from Croatia, who had struggled so far this tournament to score. It was a great fight by them. They had a great veteran group. This was also without Ivan Perisic, one of their better offensive players, because he tested positive for COVID-19. A great fight from them. But at the end of the day, Spain have really showed something over these past couple of matches. They've scored 10 total goals. Really great considering you think about that first match they had versus Sweden where they were shut out. Now they're just banging in goals left and right. They're getting contributions from everywhere. They look a little bit like their best parts of themselves from over the years. Now, of course, they don't have the roster quite like that one, but still, they've been doing a pretty good job here as of late. Defensively, though, 3-1. Got to be able to take that home, right? So they're going to have to shore up some things on that end, but still, they found a way. The offense has been great, and that's something to keep an eye on going forward for Spain. The other match on that day is one I've already talked about a little bit, and that would be France versus Switzerland. France shockingly went down 1-0 early on in this match to Switzerland, but they kicked things into high gear a little bit later on going into the second half. We had Karim Benzema scoring a couple goals, and then Paul Pogba scores that beautiful effort from outside the box to make it 3-1, and you think, surely France have got this. They know about the Spain-Croatia match. They're not going to let the same thing happen, right? Well, we were wrong. Switzerland did the exact same thing. They scored 2 late goals to get the match to extra time at 3-3. Nobody was able to do really anything in extra time, so we go to that penalty kick shootout. Like I said, everyone made their penalty kicks. It was Kylian Mbappe's turn, and he had his save there by Jan Sommer. Tremendously embarrassing by the French national team, the reigning World Cup champions, to let that 2-goal lead slip. You would have thought at that point that they would have locked things down. You got N'Golo Kante, you got Paul Pogba, you've got great defensive center backs. They just weren't able to figure things out. I thought Rafael Varane had a pretty poor game in this match. Just couldn't keep up with what the Swiss were doing. You had someone like, Haris Seferovic, who's had a lot of trouble in front of that, score twice in this game for Switzerland and basically be a great outlet there up top. So again, I don't think the French really took this match seriously. You could tell by that opening goal they weren't really into it. They were lucky that Switzerland missed that penalty that kind of led to the comeback for France. But again, in that extra time period, like we talked about, Mbappe, he had a chance there late on, but couldn't put it on net. That's kind of been the case here at this tournament for France. You had Benzema, who was great, but Mbappe, Griezmann just couldn't really get things going. At the end of the day, defensively, they just hadn't figured it out right. So interesting going forward. They've already said that Deschamps is keeping his job for now. You got Zinedine Zidane there waiting in the wings. I think maybe over time they could see to make a change, because I just think that France should be playing a lot more of an aggressive ball than what they've been doing. They kind of let Switzerland into this match, and they were able to capitalize. They're able to advance to the next round. So I would definitely say Czech Republic win was pretty impressive, but this was definitely the upset of the tournament so far. Then we had the historic rivalry matchup, right? England versus Germany in front of a pressurized crowd in Wembley. Match was 0-0 for the longest time. You were wondering if it was going to go to extra time. But then that man again, Raheem Sterling, stepped up, was able to convert a great pass from Luke Shaw in the 6-yard box to open the scoring for England. And then Harry Kane would score not just his first goal of this Euros, but his first goal in his career for England at the Euros to make the match 2-0. That's how England would win, and they would eliminate their rivals Germany here from Euro 2020. It was England's first knockout game win versus Germany since the 1966 World Cup final. They've played them plenty of times before in World Cup or Euro action since then, but they've always fallen short. But they get things done here. They kept their 4th consecutive clean sheet. As much as I want to question what Gareth Southgate is doing with some of his team selection, it's working. And at this point, especially on the defensive end, he definitely has a stranglehold on what his team should be doing. So I thought England, they did a good job here. Now Germany could have tied things up late on with Thomas Müller. He got sprung on a breakaway, couldn't convert his chance. That was kind of the story of Germany here at this tournament. They just don't have that guy, that Miroslav Klose or that Lukas Podolski up top who's a clinical finisher and can bang in goals. They've had to get it from other places here at this tournament. They just weren't able to get it done in this game. So England, again, have been very impressive defensively. That's been their one consistent. But here, getting goals from both Sterling and Kane, that is the recipe going forward if they want to win it all here at Euro 2020. And then last but certainly not least, the all blue and yellow matchup between Sweden and Ukraine. This was a really entertaining match. I think people had written it off maybe a little bit after what went down earlier on the day with England versus Germany. But this was fun, right? Both teams scored in regulation. It went to extra time. Not for a lack of trying, though. Both teams hit the woodwork in regular time. But we go to extra time, and then, of course, that red card to Marcus Danielsson of Sweden changes the match. Although, as we got deeper into the second period of extra time, it looked like Sweden were going to be able to hold on to get it to a penalty kick shootout. But that was not the case. Ukraine were able to score just a couple minutes before the end and win the match 2-1. They've been very pragmatic in front of goal, Ukraine, at Euro 2020. That's kind of how they got into this knockout round. They were the very last team to qualify, but that was because of the amount of goals that they had scored. Come up huge once again here. You had Alexander Zinchenko score also in this match for Ukraine. He's got to be big going forward for them. So yeah, very impressive that they were able to take care of Sweden, who had looked good on both ends so far at this tournament. They won their group, in fact, as well, and they were able to kind of get things done here. Of course, the red card helped, but then again, it's all about taking advantage of those opportunities. So good for Ukraine, able to make it to the quarterfinals. So that's everything that happened during the round of 16 at Euro 2020. Quite a lot of action to get to, and like I said, it's only going to get better here with the quarterfinals this weekend. We got the semifinals then next week on Tuesday and Wednesday, and all wraps up then the following Sunday with the final. A lot of the top teams still involved, but also a lot of surprise teams. You're going to have one of Czech Republic or Denmark in the semifinal. This really cool aspect of this tournament to think about. So again, I'll cover it all on next week's episode, but looking forward here to the conclusion of this tournament. Now I want to quickly transition over to the other international tournament going on. Talk about Copa America. We've wrapped up the group stage there. We're going to have the start of the quarterfinals here tonight. So I want to get to how we got to this point first before we look ahead to the matches this weekend. So let's start with the teams that qualified out of the group stage. And I actually want to start with Group B because that's kind of where we had some questions there on the last match day. Ecuador's 1-1 draw versus Brazil, coupled with Peru's 1-0 victory over Venezuela, was enough to get Ecuador into the quarterfinals. They qualified 1 point ahead Venezuela, who were the odd team out in that group. Again, very impressive by Ecuador to come up with the result versus Brazil, who had been undefeated so far at this tournament. They got things done, and that's what led them advancing to the quarterfinals. As for Group A, we knew that Bolivia were going to be the team that was going to be eliminated, but we didn't know about the positioning of some of the other teams. You had Uruguay versus Paraguay. Uruguay were able to win that match 1-0 on penalty kick from Edison Cavani, and they were able to leapfrog Paraguay into second place in Group A behind Argentina. So again, Argentina were the dominant team of that group, but Uruguay came up with enough performances there to finish in second. A lot of great matches there in Group A. But now, of course, we move on to the quarterfinals, which kick off tonight. So let's go through those matchups. First off, we've got Peru versus Paraguay. Interesting dynamic here. One of those teams will be moving on to the semifinals. Really like what Peru has been doing, especially on the offensive end. I actually would put them as the favorite ahead of Paraguay, but they can obviously make that a pretty defensive match and maybe grind out a result there as well. Then you got Brazil versus Chile. Very exciting matchup between these two teams. I think Chile can give them a good fight, but Brazil has obviously been the best team at this tournament so far, so I would definitely favorite them to advance. Then you get to what I think is my favorite matchup, and that would be Uruguay versus Colombia. You've got Uruguay, who sometimes play a slow, methodical style, versus Colombia, where you never know what you're going to get. You're either going to get an offensive explosion, or you're going to get a team that concedes a lot of goals and doesn't do much in front of goal. So we'll have to see which Colombia team shows up. If it's their best version, I think they advance, but if not, Uruguay will definitely take advantage. So it's definitely a true pick 'em there in that match. And then we wrap things up with Argentina versus Ecuador. Ecuador, they haven't impressed at Copa America, but they've been doing pretty good in World Cup qualifying. So this is a team that Argentina can't take lightly. We've seen kind of the developments in terms of other players helping Lionel Messi out with the scoring. The defense has been pretty good. So I think going forward, Argentina should be able to make it past Ecuador. It's about some of the other challenges with the other teams that we'll have to keep an eye on. So again, really looking forward to the final stages of Copa America. I think we're going to get the best matchups possible. Would love to see a Brazil-Argentina final, of course, but I think whatever two teams get there should be a really entertaining match. So again, you got your Euros in the morning and the afternoons. Wrap things up with Copa America at night. It's been a great tournament so far and looking forward to its conclusion. Okay, let's transition over to talk about some soccer going on here in America. Of course, we're going to start off with MLS and talk a little bit about this past weekend's results, of which there were many eye-opening ones. Started out last Friday night with a little in-state rivalry there in Florida between Orlando City SC and Inter Miami CF. Orlando were able to get 2 late goals from Chris Muller and Nani. That last one by Nani, woo, fantastic, excellent screamer. They were able to hold on and win that match 2-1 versus Miami, who did get a goal from Gonzalo Higuain to take the lead. But as we've seen here in this season, Miami just don't seem to have the horses necessary to holding on to these leads. Orlando, they've been in great form recently. They've moved up to, I believe, 2nd place in the Eastern Conference, getting great contributions up top from those guys. Nani, arguably having an MVP season. He's had that good of an impact for Orlando. So again, this was an important win against a rival to keep that momentum going for Orlando. Then you had Sporting KC win 2-1 at home versus LAFC after LAFC went down. And man, they were up 1-0 in that match, but red card happens. Sporting KC take advantage. I believe Polito scored one of the goals there for Kansas City. So missed opportunity there for LA, but Sporting KC able to bounce back there and pick up that huge 3 points. Then you had the likes of Philadelphia Union, Nashville SC, and Seattle Sounders FC held to draws in their respective matches. Been a little bit surprising from Seattle lately. They've definitely had a little bit of a dip in form. They've been drawing a few more matches more than they had been at the beginning of the season. Definitely something to look out for there. Then lastly, LA Galaxy got 2 goals from Javier Chicharito Hernandez. Were able to beat their in-state rivals, the San Jose Earthquakes, by a score of 3-1. So again, very active weekend in MLS this past week. Some interesting results. Again, Orlando picking up that big win there. Sporting KC able to come back and get those 3 points versus LA. A lot of big results there, especially, more so on the Western Conference side. As far as this weekend is concerned, the big game on ESPN is going to be Columbus Crew hosting New England Revolution, who still are in first place. The Crew kind of had a little bit of a setback with a 0-0 draw versus Austin FC on the road. We got to get things going a little bit more. And of course, the Revolution have been picking up results left and right, so I'll have to see if they can continue that momentum going forward. Then another good matchup in the Eastern Conference. You've got Nashville SC versus Philadelphia Union, 2 of the top teams there in that conference. We've seen some great battles between those 2 sides in the past. They're both capable of scoring plenty of goals, but also it could be kind of a grinding type of result there, low scoring. So we'll have to see. Should be a really entertaining match between those 2. And then lastly, Galaxy will be hosting Sporting KC. Important clash there near the top of the table in the Western Conference. You got Chicharito, who's still scoring. You got Sporting KC, who finally gotten healthy. It seems to be the better version of themselves. Should be a very entertaining matchup there out west. So things are going good so far in MLS. Of course, definitely want to be paying attention to the schedule here coming up. We'll be working our way towards the All-Star game. But of course, with the Gold Cup coming up soon, we're going to see a lot of guys, move towards that front for the U.S. men's national team. I know the roster came out. There's plenty of MLS guys on it. We'll talk a little bit about it maybe on next week's show, or at least as we get closer to the tournament. But that's something definitely to look out for here in the next few weeks with some MLS teams. So again, a lot going on, but still very entertaining matches going on here in MLS. Now I want to move on to talk a little bit about the NWSL. And before I get to results from this past weekend, I do want to talk a little bit about a story I talked about a few episodes ago, because we've had a huge development on that front and definitely deserves to be talked about. And that would be 15-year-old Olivia Moultrie signing a 3-year deal with Portland Thorns FC, officially becoming the youngest player ever to sign a professional contract with the NWSL. This was a result of that lawsuit that she filed in order to make sure that she could sign a professional contract. Remember, there's been rules in the NWSL prohibiting certain players at an age limit not to be able to sign professionally. It's being collectively bargained at this point. The judge awarded I believe a temporary injunction that allowed Moultrie to sign this contract. She's been with Portland from a very young age. She's been training with them. She's participated in preseason friendlies, but now, of course, she gets that professional contract. Now she can play for the first team. This is a huge moment in not just the NWSL, but in the sport, and also going forward in terms of this rule, because we've seen it in MLS. There's no rules against certain age limits for players. So now, of course, hopefully this leads forward for women's soccer players to sign with the NWSL at whatever age they are ready to do so. So again, congrats to Olivia signing that first professional contract. Looking forward to her getting some chances with that first team. Again, she's been hailed as a soccer prodigy from a very young age, so she's obviously ready for this type of moment, and just glad that she'll be able to get it here as soon as possible. So again, congrats to her on making history and becoming the youngest player to sign a professional contract in the NWSL. As far as the action out on the pitch from this past weekend in the NWSL, let's start with New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC and Racing Louisville FC, who were able to win their matches 3-0 versus OL Reign and Chicago Red Stars, respectively. It's been interesting to see this start by the Reign. They've brought in all that talent from Lyon, but they just haven't been able to get the results quite just yet. Then you had that big match between the North Carolina Courage and Portland Thorns FC. The NC Courage were able to win 2-0 on 2 more goals from Lynn Williams. She's been absolutely on fire here over these past couple of matches. Big result there by North Carolina to kind of, jump ahead of Portland in the table. Then you had the Houston Dash upset the first place Orlando Pride by a score of 2-1. Very impressive result by the Dash, a team that, again, in terms of the consistency, may not be there quite just yet, but they're definitely capable of coming up with a big result versus one of the top teams. And then lastly, in the 5th minute of stoppage time, Washington Spirit rookie Trinity Rodman was able to score to help lead her team to a 2-1 win over Kansas City. She's been having a great season so far for Washington. I think she's gotten a little bit more in terms of her starts here the past few weeks. Came up with a very clutch goal to get those 3 points for the Spirit. So it's been great to watch her play, and an excellent result here for Washington. As for the schedule this weekend in the NWSL, there's at least one great match on every day. Starts out tonight with the Houston Dash versus OL Reign. Can the Reign start to figure things out and get out of this slump, or can the Dash build upon that momentum from that big win versus Orlando last weekend? Then on Saturday, can I interest you in Racing Louisville FC versus Portland Thorns FC? Should be a high-scoring affair between these two teams. In terms of the defensive setup, Louisville, sometimes you're going to get this clean sheet, or sometimes they're going to give up 3 goals. So it should be an entertaining match. Obviously, Portland have got a ton of talent, so it should be a fun one. Then lastly, I think the biggest match of the weekend, no question. Once again, we're getting another first versus second place match. This time it's going to be between the Orlando Pride and the North Carolina Courage. The Courage, they've looked fantastic over these past couple matches. Like I said, Lynn Williams has been on a hot streak. Of course, they've got, Jessica McDowell. They've got Davinia. A lot of talent there. And of course, Orlando will counter with Alex Morgan and Sydney LaRue, some of the other players on that team. So that should be a really fun one. Could determine a switch at the top of the table if North Carolina win. But of course, Orlando can keep that first place slot if they're able to get a result. So that's a great way to finish up this weekend in the NWSL. A lot of action. And of course, that great news to hear about Olivia Moultrie makes for an interesting part here in the season as we move forward here. Of course, we know the Olympics will be coming up. A lot of players will have to commit at that point, although I'm not sure if there's going to be a break or something in the season. I don't think there is for the NWSL, so it'll be interesting to see how those teams react to all those players leaving. But for the time being, going to see them all here in action over the next couple weeks in the NWSL. Now let's transition over to what has happened over the past week in the USL Championship. First, I want to get to this past weekend's results because a lot went down across all the divisions here in this league. Starting off with Pittsburgh Riverhounds SC beating New York Red Bulls 2 by a score of 2-1. Great to see a couple former St. Louis FC players get the goals there in Todd Wharton and Albert Dequa. Pittsburgh, again, in terms of the results, they've been doing a lot better recently. They just got to keep finding that consistency. But here, they were obviously able to pick up the 3 points. Then you had FC Tulsa hold on to beat Rio Grande Valley FC Toros by a score of 2-1. A little bit of an upset, but in terms of obviously the form they showed at the beginning of the season, Tulsa were capable of this result, and they were able to get things done here. Then you had Tampa Bay Rowdies beat Hartford Athletic by a score of 1-0. This match was a little bit closer than maybe people would expect. Hartford, they showed a lot of fight here, but we have seen over these past couple weeks when they've gone up against the better teams in their division, they haven't been able to get things done. Then you had Central Division foes, Louisville City FC and Indy 11 go at it. This was a very entertaining 3-3 draw. It was basically punch, counter punch all the way up through, especially in the first half. And again, when these two get together, always a fun time, but both of them share that 1 point there in that match. And then lastly, the other result that caught my eye, the Miami FC holding on for a 2-1 win versus the Charlotte Independents. Good to see Miami get a really top result against a good team here in this match. A goal late there was able to seal it. And yeah, a little bit of a setback for Charlotte, but they should be able to bounce back here soon. Then in terms of midweek results from this past week, some that caught my eye, I caveated Pittsburgh's win earlier because they would go on to lose 2-1 versus Loudoun United FC. So again, in terms of the inconsistencies there, they got to figure that out. Another result that caught my eye, Rio Grande holding on for a 3-2 victory over El Paso Locomotive FC. Again, good bounce back there by Rio Grande. El Paso, definitely a really good team there out west, but Rio were able to get things done there. Then, unfortunately, other thing I wanted to talk about, Birmingham Legion FC having another match abandoned. This was another match that they were in, but in terms of due to weather, They just weren't able to continue, especially with the field conditions there. I think they've had at least 3 matches, either canceled, postponed, suspended, whatever. It's really unfortunate occurrence. Again, somebody I talked about last week, Nico Brett, he scored again in this match because the match didn't finish. It doesn't count. It was really unfortunate. So they got to figure things out there with the pitch with Birmingham, because they've been having a good season when they've been able to play. But because of these inconsistencies in the conditions, they've had a lot of matches, interrupted, postponed, whatever. So hopefully, the weather improves over there in Alabama and they can get going here on the season. Just another unfortunate occurrence, and hopefully something they can work on. As far as this weekend is concerned, there's a lot of good matches on tonight. A lot of the top teams are in action, highlighted by that Oklahoma rivalry between Oklahoma City Energy FC and FC Tulsa. They played in the very first match of the season, way back in April. So good to see them getting back here underway between these two this weekend. Then moving on into tomorrow, you've got Birmingham versus Indy 11. Hopefully they play that match. I'm just kidding. But should be an entertaining clash there between two teams in the Central Division. Also tomorrow, you got a good matchup between Pittsburgh and Charlotte. A couple Texas teams will be in action versus each other in San Antonio FC and Austin Bold FC. Then you got a little bit of a rivalry matchup there between El Paso and New Mexico United. And then you can finish the things up at night with Phoenix Rising FC versus LA Galaxy 2, top 2 teams there in that division. So again, lots of good action going on, a lot of great performances so far. Again, some teams are starting to separate themselves in their divisions, but elsewhere, at least 2, maybe 3 divisions are still relatively close, with a lot of teams competing for those playoff spots. So again, good action to supplement everything else that is going on here in the U.S. So you'll definitely want to check out the USL Championship when you can this weekend. Okay, let's talk some St. Louis soccer. And I want to start off with St. Louis FC Academy. I said I would provide a little bit of an update on their performance at the MLS NEXT playoffs. So here we go. From this past weekend, St. Louis FC Academy sent 4 teams across 4 different age groups to compete in the inaugural MLS NEXT playoffs. The under-19s were the best team at their age in the showcase, but unfortunately they lost in the first round of the MLS NEXT Cup to Solar FC. The under-17s also had a really good performance during the showcase, but they also lost in the first round, I believe a 1-0 decision to Charlotte FC. Unfortunately, the under-15s and under-16s weren't able to pick up a result during their time at the playoffs, but still, they were there, they were competing, and they were among some of the best teams in the nation, and that just goes to show all of the work and dedication that the St. Louis FC Academy has put into, crafting these teams, helping develop these players, and to get to this point in MLS NEXT. It's been incredible to see. Obviously, we talked with Luis Swisher before on Atletico TV, and again, a good friend, see what he's been doing with this academy. It's been fantastic. And some of the other coaches, what they've been able to do with these other teams at different age levels. Tremendous congrats to them for them getting to this point in MLS NEXT. It's going to be exciting going forward to see what they can do. So this is a great, inaugural first step for the academy to compete at this national level. Yeah, looking forward to next season and seeing what they can do here in the fall. Okay, up next, St. Louis Scott Gallagher were in action last night. They were on the road taking on Kaw Valley FC, and they absolutely crushed them by a score of 6-2. Christian Krause scored twice, while SLSG also got goals from John Klein, Jacob Bu, Chris Brook, and Jordan Watson. Klein has now scored in 3 straight matches. An absolutely comprehensive performance here by St. Louis Scott Gallagher. We've definitely seen the offense over the past few matches. Obviously, a little bit of a blip in the road there versus Chicago, but versus Green Bay and here versus Kaw Valley, we've seen the full force of the offensive attack. Considering that they play tomorrow night once again versus Kaw Valley, they had to do a little bit of rotation here, and they still got a lot of goals. Good to see Christian Krause get a couple more. We saw him break through versus Green Bay. So again, good to see him, and also, of course, John Klein playing some fantastic soccer right now. So again, good to get back in the win column. They take on Kaw Valley FC again tomorrow night on the road, but they wrap up things, I believe, next week versus the Des Moines Menace. So again, good to see SLSG get back in the win column. Okay, now it's time to talk about our 2 local area WPSL clubs, and that, of course, would be Fire&Ice and the St. Louis Lions. They played in the second round this season of their derby this past week, but they both came into this match coming off of a loss. Now, Fire&Ice did beat the Dayton Dutch Lions by a score of 2-1 on the road before losing to Columbus Eagles FC by a score of 4-2. The Lions, they only had 1 match from this past weekend on the road versus Cincinnati Sirens FC, and they would lose that match 5-0. So both teams were looking for a bounce back on Wednesday. This match featured a little bit of a lightning delay, but they were able to get it finished before the rain hit later on in the night. This round also went to Fire&Ice. They would win this match 3-0 on a hat trick from Mackenzie Litzinger. Very impressive performance by her. She finished it up with a penalty kick that she was able to convert. But still, this was another great overall performance by Fire&Ice, who really controlled the tempo of this game. They controlled the possession. They had the majority of the chances. The Lions actually started well in this match. They had an opportunity to score early on. They just weren't able to convert it, and then it kind of cascaded from there. Unfortunate because they're continuing to seek for their first result of the season. Still a very competitive bout. Great to see these two local area teams really going at it, putting on a great competitive display and making it through the weather conditions. But at the end of the day, once again, this round, like the first one, went to Fire&Ice, who were also able to hold on to a clean sheet. I talked to both coaches after the match. First, talked to Fire&Ice coach Lindsay Eversmeyer about the team's performance, what they've been doing well lately, and of course, about the great form that Mackenzie Litzinger has shown over the past few games.
I just think we work together as a team really well. It takes a little bit of time for the girls to mesh, especially since they don't play with each other normally. So finding players and just trying to get them all to work together and learn how each other plays is the biggest thing. So I think they're starting to do that more and more the later we get in the season.
You guys have had contributions from everybody this season, but tonight it was all about Mackenzie Litzinger, and she's been on quite good form here the past few matches. What has she been doing well the most to come up with all these goals for you guys?
Well, just finishing, just finishing. That's all it is, because our players obviously get the ball to her. That's the biggest thing as a forward. You can't do it all by yourself. It's your teammates that are actually giving you the good balls in. So the fact that she finishes those balls that are given to her, that's what I think is just key for her. On the flip side, here's what head coach of the St. Louis Lions, Jeff Lorimer, had to say about what the team has been working on over the past few weeks and how they've been able to maintain, their high spirits and their form as they've gone through their struggles here in this season.
That first 5 minutes was kind of our the mantra for our season. We just haven't had the luck. They cleared the ball off the line there. It's we go 1-0 up 5 minutes in. I think it's a little different game. We're working on our build out, connecting passes from the back four to the midfield six, and I thought she did a good job coming through there. Again, to their credit, they pressed us when we did, so we didn't look another level. So that's kind of the next piece there. Offensively, the final third, I thought we were finally able to get the ball wide and bring some crosses in as well. And and again, it's just finding that next piece. But there's some flashes of our last few sessions in there today, so that was good. In every game there's a positive and there's a negative. Whether you're winning or losing, there's a positive and a negative. So it's real easy to obviously focus on the negatives when you're sitting the record we're in. So we just challenge them to think of the positives, how far they've come in just a short time, and then just come out and be ready to fight the last three.
So again, I thought this was a great display of local St. Louis talent. Great to see these two teams thriving, still having this season, and hopefully, going forward, there'll be success for both of them in the future. Both of them are off this weekend before hitting the last part of their schedule coming up here next week. So again, get out there, support these two teams, and as they finish up this season, looking forward to seeing some more local soccer here in the next few weeks. So for my guest this week, I was able to catch up with a good friend and colleague from my time at Bradley University who's been moving up in the sports world over the past 2 years. Has been having a great time lately with his new gig, covering one of the more well-known brands in lower-level soccer here in the U.S. Hope you enjoy. Well, I'm honored to be joined by this week a very good friend of mine from my time at Bradley University, as well as someone who's currently working for WKOW 27 News in Wisconsin as a sports/news multimedia journalist. Pablo Igleias. Pablo, thanks for joining me on the show this week, bud.
Josh, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, man. Again, and also wanted to give you a huge congrats as well with your new ventures and everything. As you said too, we go a little bit back. We go, I'm trying to think. 2017, when we graduated in college, doesn't feel like it's was that long ago, and yet so much has happened since. So, but again, happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to get to chat.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Looking forward, to those next few steps, going forward. But I want to talk a little bit about you to start off here. I brought you in for a variety of different things that we'll get into with this interview. But obviously, this is a little bit more of an interview for me. I like to do stuff that people are interested in here, especially in St. Louis. But I wanted to bring you in because I think you have a great story. I want to first start off by talking about your time at Bradley, coming into school, knowing you wanted to work in sports, but not quite figuring out what you wanted to do, and then going out of Bradley and out into the sports industry. Talk to me a little bit about your journey and how you arrived at what you wanted to do.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because we were like what we were just talking about before we hit the record button here, is that I think the funny thing too is that, especially in art and really any industry, honestly, like there's no one way to get to a certain point. Like there's always like different adventures and different journeys. I mean, honestly, for me, like I always knew that broadcast was a passion that I had. I loved it. I loved the storytelling aspect of it. And I fell in love with it again as a kid at a young age. And my high school too, we had a broadcast program, and it was like a club, but still it was something that I loved. I had fun, but I also took it seriously too, because I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. So it started from that point. Then I made it to Bradley, the sports communication program. Did a bunch of different things there. Worked with was at the sports desk for a semester over with BUTV News. We did a little bit of reporting from time to time. Did some internships out there, and then after graduation, I actually took a different job in creative marketing for about a year. But ultimately, I knew that broadcast was always going to be my thing. Like broadcast was always going to be my goal. I did some freelance too, thanks to some networking and thanks to some friends where I was at like a bunch of different NBA games for Eagle News based out of the Philippines. It was the crazy thing actually is that I was working my regular it was like basically regular 8-hour workday. And sometimes I would have games like that same day, and I'd be going like straight from my 9 to 5 straight to the United Center. Maybe having a dinner break in between, or just sometimes even just going straight to the stadium. And I was working, I guess to say it like that, like it's basically like 13-hour days. Like that's how it was operating. But sometimes that's what it takes. And for me, none of that was paid. It was all out of my own pocket if I wanted to go travel. And, I'm grateful to get to have experiences to go to the Final Four in San Antonio for that freelance while I was working that 9 to 5. Landed a job in Peoria back, our old stomping grounds where we went to school for about 2 years. And now I'm in Madison, and I've been there for about like 3 months now. And it's really crazy to think about how fast time has gone.
So you've already talked about, just like you said, you've already had a couple of different jobs since coming out of school, right? So you're used to kind of the fast-paced nature of the industry, the ability to make adjustments. If something doesn't work out, to move on and successfully, get into a new position. I want to ask you a little bit about that before we get into the soccer, because I think it's always good to talk a little bit about that process, especially for those who are interested in working in this industry. So far in your experiences, what have you learned about having to deal with what it is all about and basically having to deal with that fast-paced nature of it?
I think that's a cool point that you bring up too, with about adaptability and everything. It's absolutely true. You do have to be adaptable, and honestly, the mindset that I've been taking recently because of my current supervisor, my sports director that I work with in our department. I mean, honestly, so I'll tell you, nerves are all over the place. Like especially like when you start out, obviously you want to do well, you want to do your thing. I've tried to adopt this mindset where it's like, and it's always, again, it's scary when you start a new job, and sometimes you think like, oh, like, am I ready for this type of thing, wherever it's at. Don't lose that sense of confidence. I would definitely say that to a lot of people. Like it is, again, it's scary starting in a new environment, but that's just my quick piece of advice. But for me, my first live shot, not even a week there, was when Barry Alvarez, the Wisconsin's longtime athletic director, famous coach. I mean, what was it? He's been there for like 30 something years. Barry all of a sudden announces his retirement. And that's all of a sudden, it's like, that's my first live shot. And it's a pretty big deal. Like there are a lot of different people coming, not just from Madison, but in like Wisconsin stations in general, just trying to be there for that story. So like, I kind of like had like a little bit of the jitters, but the advice that I got from my sports director, Lance, he just said, he's like, really just look at it from this way. Every situation is going to be the same for a live shot, no matter what. You're still going to have 15 seconds of this. And from there, I tried to take that same mindset, no matter where I'm at, like just keep doing your thing, get that repetition, feel as comfortable as you possibly can. And the other piece of advice too, that I've heard like a little before that, was to also just, embrace your nerves too. Don't be afraid of just like, hey, I'm nervous, but embrace that, recognize that you are a little nervous, because the more you try to suppress, or the more you like try to like push that away, it's going to start eating you up. So ride those nerves, take a deep breath. And even if you have a little bit of those jitters, it's all right, because, we're always like so ingrained, we're in our minds so much that we're like, oh my God, like I can't get this out. But like, once you just go with it, you take that deep breath and embrace that you are a little nervous, all of a sudden, things feel like a little easier for you, and you can start like, slowly but surely like chopping away at that.
So that's your personal and your professional background. Now to finish it off here, since this is a soccer show, I want to talk to you a little bit about your soccer background. You already get high marks for that Megan Rapinoe shirt that you are wearing. Talk a little bit about some of the soccer you've been following either lately or just some of the things and teams that you're interested in terms of this sport.
It's honestly all over the place, and I love it. I want to say probably within, I would say like one of my friends from high school definitely got me more into the sport, and I want to say this is probably my sophomore junior year where like I started to gauge a little bit more of interest and watching the sport. I think part of it was the men's World Cup run, and then obviously with the women's too. And now the success that the women's team has, like just time after time, is just absolutely incredible. Like I love their run, and I don't think it's going to be ending anytime soon. And shameless plug, I was just watching their the HBO Max documentary LFG, which talks about their World Cup run, but also more, of course, on the bigger side of the lawsuit that they have against the U.S. Soccer Federation. It's a really interesting story because you get to hear specifically from the players. So that was a really interesting story outside of the U.S. national team. But I think the other World Cup run too was the Mexico's men a few years ago. I think when they beat Germany in the opening round. I mean, I'll never forget that game. I mean, I'm in the living room where I was watching it right here too. I never thought that they would ever take down the defending champion the way that they did in that 1-0 game. They parked the bus in the second half, and I'm just like, oh my God, like that game was fun. Big Liverpool guy. Again, another college buddy actually really got me into them. I started watching a lot more games. We went to the Big House when they played Manchester United. This was, I'm trying to think. I think this was also 2018. Yes, yeah, it was. So this was summer of 2018 when they played in Michigan. And basically everybody was there too, because I want to say almost everyone was, their countries were eliminated by that point. So they were like playing like the summer leg. So Salah was there. We got Mane. That was Shaqiri's first game with Liverpool. So that was pretty sick. And that was the year that they ended up that was the year that they ended up winning the Champions League. So that was fun. Let's see. I'm just running through a bunch of different stuff. I mean, those are the big ones too that I would really love to point out.
So of course now your soccer background has expanded just a little bit. Prior to you joining up with your new job here at Wisconsin, had you had any prior knowledge of the little soccer team known as Forward Madison FC? What were your experiences before jumping in the position? Did you know anything a little bit about them?
I'll tell you, when I was interviewing for the job, obviously I knew that Madison had, even like the pro sports in Wisconsin too were like huge. Obviously it was like, it's the Packers, the Badgers, Brewers, and Bucks like across the state that attract you into it. But then it was like, as I was talking, or just like learning more about the sports, like actually outside of Forward Madison too, like I'll tell a lot of stuff about them. I mean, even like, some of the Northwoods League team that's in Madison, but also the Ultimate Frisbee team, and just knowing that they, in general, like, and come bring this back into Forward Madison, the Flamingos as they also go by too. Like, it's just contagious. Like, I'll leave it at that with just how fun they are. I mean, one, they're an energetic team, and I think just something about being at Breese Stevens Field, and I go a little bit on a story at this one. I've covered like a few games when I started at over here at the station in Madison, but I think it was super fun because let's see, Forward Madison's home opener was our first pro game, or at least the first pro game that I got to cover when I was out here. And it was limited capacity still. I want to say just like right over about 1,000, maybe like 1,200 fans, outdoor venue. And it was their home opener. The other wild thing is that they still played last year, but technically they couldn't play in their home stadium. They couldn't play in the county because of the COVID restrictions. So they had to basically find, I think, this practice field because they still needed to play their USL games. So they didn't have any fans. So they hadn't played in front of a crowd in 2019. And they're a young team. They haven't even been around for 5 years. And yet they have this, again, as I'll describe it, this contagious fan base. Like, everything is just so much fun. And I think especially being that first game back, it's like, everybody's like feeling good. Everybody's feeling good. And it's like, what's going to happen? Of course, it was a 1-0 game where the goal was scored in stoppage time and not in the 93rd minute by Derek Gebhard. And it just, the place erupted. Like, you just felt that tension. And the fun thing too was that it was raining, but it wasn't like coming down hard. It was like more that mist, and no one cared. No one cared. Like, it was that environment. Then again, 93rd minute, I remember exactly because I was on their side. It was a great through ball, and it was a second chance shot basically. And Gebhard just comes in on the follow, and everybody again just goes nuts. And like, I'll send you the shot too, just so you can kind of see it. Everybody throws their cups up. You just see like towels flying everywhere, the vuvuzelas, all that stuff. And people were so excited that the fan section, like there's a stanchion. They knocked down that stanchion because that's how excited people were. They had to pick it back up. Everybody celebrated. But again, I think like it was just a mixture of so many emotions. Again, just being back at Breese Stevens Field, their home field. And just like it's the home opener, and it's like people are finally back. It gave you, because right at that time too, Wisconsin was really trying to push the vaccine, trying to get it out there for people, as many people as they could, and they're doing well with numbers, but especially the Madison area. But it's like it just kind of felt like that you're slowly starting to get to the point that a good point that we're at now, I guess, to kind of say it like that. There was just so many emotions, and I think that was the cherry on top to know it's like, yes, this is the storybook, or it's like, as I guess I said it too, was like a new chapter for the 2021 season starts with a storybook ending, essentially. That's the way that I phrased it, because it was just such an electric atmosphere, and to do it like that, it only made sense.
So I think you did a good job of pretty much summarizing up what it is all about over there at Fort Madison FC. Again, the facts of the matter is that they're a third division soccer team in this country. And, in terms of financial resources and getting the word out about the team, that can be quite difficult for a lot of those teams. But if you look at their social media following, I mean, they blow teams above them in other divisions out of the water. Like, they are a well-known brand. We talked a little bit about the atmosphere there right now, not just this season, but what they've been able to do. I know you've only been there for like a little bit, but in terms of just how this team is able to be as successful as they are, not just on the field, but off the field. They do a bunch of crazy promotions. They release a jersey every week, it seems like, and they're all just killer designs. It's just amazing to think about how successful they've been. In the little time that you've been there, if you had to explain to people why this team is so popular and why they're doing so well, what would you say are some of the other factors?
Oh my God, that's a great question too, because I've gotten to talk to the owner, Connor Kaloya. He's a great guy. I think just again the energy that they bring, I love it. There's another guy too. He is more of a nickname. It's more of his social media presence. So it's Turbo Tobin. And every home game after they win, he'll go to what's called the flock, which is the fan section, and everything. He'll go up and he will chug a beer right in front of them, and everybody loves it. And everybody, it's just like it's turbo. It's very turbo. That's what everybody knows. And I think it's part of the promotions. It's just that Madison, I think in general, just feels like, and again, when you're really there, like you can just feel that energy. Everybody's like doused in that light blue and pink. I mean, it's really amazing. Like, not only that, but the multiple support groups that they have a lot of, different groups when it comes to diversity, ethnicities, a lot of inclusivity. I want to say there's a huge, like, Forward Madison, like LGBTQ plus, like group within. So there's like different advocate groups like within this fan base, which is so incredible. And again, I think just like Madison, just being the city that it is, they're so welcoming. And, to not even have this team, honestly, for 5 years, or like, honestly, even less, it's just fantastic to see the support that they've had. As you said, they just do a heck of a great job of marketing themselves, and the jerseys are sweet. or the kits are just to die for. Like, it's, I mean, I went as a fan, probably, I want to say like late May. And I was like, I just said to myself, I'm like, I know I'm just going to get a jersey. I know it. And I finally just caved and I got it. And man, it's sweet. I love wearing it. I'm not going to lie. It's a really cool jersey.
Well, again, my limited experiences with them, they've come to St. Louis and played St. Louis FC here a couple of times, once in the Open Cup, which was a really cool thing. Again, it's just amazing to see their fan base and what they're able to do with the resources they have at that level. Again, they smash it out of the water, and it's just really cool. I want to get your perspective since you've actually been there and you're actually following what they've been doing. So that's really cool. But speaking of diversity and inclusion, I want to talk to you a little bit about an organization that you are a part of and kind of shed some light there, because I think it's really important to highlight their work. You're a member of the Asian American Journalist Association. I don't know in terms of your process, how long you've been with them. I know you've gone to some of their events. I think you've gotten to speaking at one before. Talk to me a little bit about them, and what would you say their goal is for their organization?
Yeah, so I've been a member, I want to say, since right after I graduated, when we graduated out of college. So 2017, I've technically been like an actual member. I did a high school program with them in 2011, which actually, I just got a message there like, hey, it's the 10-year anniversary. We're trying to put together, these Zoom calls. You want to be part of a panel? So I'm like, yeah, sure. And then I thought about it. I was like, wow, I did this 10 years ago. So it's like, it's crazy to think how fast time flies. But yeah, so I'm a really heavy member, just involved with a lot of different things. Grateful to be able to have been a panelist or be on panels and be the moderator for two separate conventions. The first one was talking about, the true sides of burnout and mental health, and trying to, make sure that essentially destigmatizing things. We had a great panel. We had two reporters, one freelance and one with the Philadelphia Inquirer. We also had a therapist come in too, mental health, expert basically, to talk about different things. And I think it was a great conversation where everybody just talked about, hey, how do you avoid burnout? And even just sharing our own personal experiences too. I think that was, it was a really powerful conversation to open up that door, whether people wanted to ask questions or not. I think that was fantastic. And then what I did last year for that for a different panel was intro to your first convention, or what it's like, how to take advantage of those types of things. And again, I'm grateful for the organization, because not only is it a good professional resource, but I've met some of my closest friends. It's a really good thing, and essentially we're all each other's hype crew. And as I mentioned too before this, especially like our sports task force division, I mean, honestly, if it weren't for the amount of people that I met the first convention I went to in Philadelphia, I would have never known like how to really get my foot into the door, how to put my reel together, how to understand like what the ins and outs of the industry are, and again, like how to get that foot in the door. I think the organization has also reinforced my passion in a different way, where I never recognized it until being at my first convention, knowing that there are people that share this type of passion for the industry. And honestly, like the people that look like me, like I never really thought of too many people in sports, sprinkled through journalism. I mean, there were fantastic Asian journalists that I was growing up, but there were only so many. And I think now, as we continue to keep pushing for those talks and try to figure out, ways to get everybody, like as we mentioned, diversity and inclusivity, I think it is reinforced in a different way that, we have this goal where we want to try to, get as many people out there, show that it's possible to do anything, essentially, just put your mind to it, set your goals on, and, honestly, just inspiring people like that are within your world. Because you never know who's watching, essentially. And, not just for myself, but like to see like my other friends too. Like if we can all be part of something to inspire somebody one day, to say like, hey, I want to do that. Hey, such and such, like, wow, they look like me. I totally want to do this. I think that's something that's really inspiring to think. And again, it's just, you think about something that's bigger than you, and hopefully you can be a part of that one day.
Well, that's fantastic, man. That's kind of really why I wanted to bring you in here, just because, especially with your guys' work, right? And it's unfortunate, over these past few years to see the rise in hate crimes here against Asian Americans in this country. But I guess one positive way of looking at it is, especially in your position, is, you guys can do something about it, right? You know, being journalists, you can tell stories, you can highlight these problems, you can help promote other people, diversity, inclusion, other Americans in this industry into those higher positions. And you guys can directly do something about that in terms of just, you know, combating those types of issues and combating, you know, things against diversity and against inclusion with your work. This is the organization to be a part of, right? If you're looking to do something, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, honestly, again, I would definitely give them major props because one of my first stories actually that I did here in Madison was related to Hideki Matsuyama winning the Masters, and you know I didn't think about like I mean I was just excited. You know, whenever I see like you know Hideki Matsuyama or just like a I guess like even like watching Shohei Ohtani in the MLB, it's just like, hey, look at this. This is awesome. This is cool. Taking the world by storm. But I think especially knowing how coveted, no, not to, you know, just specifically on Matsuyama's situation, to know how coveted that green jacket is and to know that he is the first Asian male, or I'm sorry, the first Asian male to win, to put on that green jacket was such a phenomenal thing. And when I did some research, I did find that there are 4 Badger golfers on the women's team that are of Asian descent. So I reached out to their PR person. I reached out to, you know, I talked to our sports director. I was like, hey, you know, I've got this story. You know, what do you think of this? And I got the green lights. And, you know, honestly, that was within my first month. But going back to it, honestly, I think, you know, just having the confidence that AAJA has given me helped me pursue that type of story to tell, you know, what does it mean to the Asian American community to see a win like this? You know, what does that mean? I think that was just a powerful story to where, you know, I was very humbled to be a part of, and once again get the green light so early because, you know, honestly, these types of stories can be, you know, how do you tackle them sometimes? But if you go about it the way where you want to talk about, like, you know, again, storytelling and everything, and going about the right way with it and trying to tell it organically, I think that's it basically, like what somebody told me, it's like it becomes a beautiful thing. It really does.
Well, man, I always appreciate talking with you. You're always a great conversation. You've been a good friend in this industry over the years, but it was even more important so today to talk about some of these issues and talk a little bit about your work, which I definitely think is important. And for people who want to follow more of your work, especially if those interested in more for Madison FC coverage or anything else going on, where can people check that out?
Yeah, I'm always on Twitter. Honestly, I am at Pablo Igleias TV. Feel free to follow me on Insta as well at Pablo Igleias, I think _TV. I've also got a Facebook page, Pablo Igleias Sports Anchor. This is all like off the top of the dome too. I was like, I didn't think I could do that. But yeah, those are the best places to find me. Twitter, I think, has always been my main one. I said this the other day where it's a mix of like, I'll give you sports news and I'll also be myself. I like to just have fun with it essentially. And you'll see that when you're out there, but those are my big 3.
Awesome, man. Well, again, it's great catching up with you. Continue good luck and with your work here at your new job. And yeah, again, looking forward to more what you can do. Pardon the pun there. Looking forward to more what you can do. Can't get it out of me. But man, Pablo Igleias, thanks again, man, for joining me on the show this week.
Thanks a lot, Josh.
My thanks to Pablo for joining me on the show. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're looking for more Euro 2020 coverage, go to the Beautiful Game Network and you can check out some of my written work. We've made it through the month of June. July is surely going to be as fast and furious. There's going to be plenty of fireworks out on the pitch, as there will be in the sky this weekend. Everybody have a happy July 4th. I'll be back here next week with another brand new episode. Take care and have a great weekend.